Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of All Things NBA from A to Z, presented by Ball is Life. I'm Kris Persian, and here alongside Zach Noble and Albert Nguyen, the analytics capper. We are here today with a tough, tall task, and that is we are going to do this podcast until we are in agreement on who the top five NBA players are in order. So you guys know this is definitely not a podcast where we all agree with every single thing the other person's saying. We try and meet in the middle, and that's going to be necessary today because we've got to agree on a top five. So, in all things NBA, show consensus top five of basketball players right now. And I should note we are not projecting. We are not looking into the 2024-2025 season just yet. It's a long off season, folks. We are talking about we've got the Olympic sample size, and I say, we'll include it, but this past NBA season and the Olympic sample size, who are the top five players in the world? Because I always think it's part of how you get into next season is having your takes, set about what you just saw. And without further ado, Zach, I know you are firm on who your number one player in the league is. So why don't you just save us some time? Start us off with who the best player in the league is, and we'll see. We'll see if we can start out hot in agreement. Um, what do you
Yeah,
got?
everything is earned in this world, man. Everything is earned. And honestly, yeah, you got to factor in what's built up to this year. But he was the best player through the year, in my opinion. And I base it a lot on I factor in circumstances, your team, but winning is the most important. Which player leads to the most amount of wins? They all have the stats, all right? All these guys at the top have the stats. They're all pretty equal. But who can contribute to the most wins? Who makes their players around them better? And who can play a little bit of both sides of the ball, and that's still Nikola Jokic. I think um, until somebody else wins the title and played great in the finals, or wins the MVP and plays great in the playoffs. I mean, my number two guy was very close, but just didn't have a great last round of the playoffs he played in. We'll put it as that as my teaser.
Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
Al,
Interesting.
when you think best player in the NBA, who's the first guy you think of?
Honestly, I was gonna try to challenge Zach here. Like heading into this podcast,
No
I
fake
thought
shit
about,
now.
man, yeah, I thought about,
Be
man, there's gonna
authentic.
be some things where Zach and I are not gonna agree. But the deeper that you dive into Nikola Jokic's just full body of work, um, it's almost far and away he's number one. I know, Zach, you mentioned one, two, three is set in stone and four is hard. I think one is set in stone and the rest is up for debate because
All
when we
right.
think about Nikola Jokic and his offensive brilliance, his passing ability, his shot making, his he's lost his three pointer and he's still the best offensive player in the league. But this is what really, really surprised me when I looked into it. Defensive win shares. So obviously, the defensive player of the year, Rudy Gobert, is number one. But number two in the entire NBA is Nikola Jokic. Think about that for a second.
Underrated. Great
So
call.
second in defensive win shares, he's first in overall win shares, first in value over replacement players. So Vorp, I love Vorp as my favorite stat, right? And then if you
Well,
just look at the straight box score plus minus, he's first. So I mean, people can knock his defense all they want, but the fact that he can carry his team to the playoffs, win the finals, he's won now three MVPs in 4 years, could have been arguably four straight years. He's carried his country all the way to, a true contender in the world when it comes to the Olympics and the World Cup. I think it's Nikola Jokic, and it's nobody else at number one.
I'm going to keep it simple and agree here. It's Jokic right now. For a long time, I had Curry. For a little bit, I had Giannis. Right now we're in the Jokic age, the Jokic era of this league. You
Oh, we're
take a
gonna
look at
debate that Curry one on another show.
you take a look at EPM, offensive EPM, and he's number two in the NBA after Luka Doncic, and they're very close, right? Overall EPM, Jokic is fifth, and obviously his defensive EPM isn't, off the charts incredible or anything, but whatever, right? Like Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, I think gets too much credit from EPM defensively because of just how good the Thunder are as a defensive team. Blah blah blah. You look at Darko DPM. I think EPM and Darko DPM are the two analytics for me if I'm trying to be as objective as possible. And I can tell you that those are the two that front offices like the most across the NBA. The Knicks and Celtics love EPM. A lot of teams love Darko DPM. And as of right now, the highest player between Jokic, Luka, Giannis, Shea, Embiid, it's Jokic, right? So the career progression, I mean, he is definitely easily number one out of those five. And for me, that's backing up what I see, which is no matter what you want to say about his archetype of player, no matter what you want to say about the need for a elite defensive center in the modern NBA to be the linchpin of your, defensive scheme, he is good enough at that position on defense when it actually really matters. Um, and he's shown it by winning a championship. What else is there to do? Giannis, I think, had the same kind of thing where he won a championship and people were like, okay, this guy's the best player in the league. It's Jokic's turn right now. It could be Embiid next year. It could be Luka next year, whatever it is, right? Like when you go and win the ring and you're the clear best player, you'll get named the best player in the world. Um, if you are like you were saying, Zach, at the start, the by far best player in the playoffs and in the finals that year. So I'm going to agree. Jokic will take the number one spot here for us. I'm glad we have that squared away. I'm glad
Last thing
that
I want to note on this,
go for it.
like, there's the one criticism, like some people try to make up, because you're always trying to nitpick these guys at the top to separate them. People want to say that he somewhat struggled late in the games in the playoffs, and I push back on that heavily, even though none of these guys had a perfect playoffs, none of them, and very rarely do they. Yes, maybe Jokic did when he won the title. Yes, maybe Giannis had a pretty damn good one when he won the title, but it's very rare these guys go unscathed through the entire postseason. And so you can't really use that argument against any of these guys below him here. But to counter that, I would say all of his supporting cast really struggled this year. Like they really took a step back. I wanted to see if you guys agreed with that point.
I do. I like that analysis a lot because everybody expected, Jamal Murray in the finals 2 years ago to catapult into superstardom in the regular season the following year. And Jamal Murray is who Jamal Murray is, guys. Like he is a very up and down player. When he's up, his ceiling is great. He's an amazing shot maker. Hit the game winner against the Lakers, all that kind of stuff. But when he's down and he's injured and he's hurt, he's just hobbling and just not as effective. So his wide spectrum of high and low is so big, and the fact that Jokic is like this, like I don't know, unassailable, movable object that is always on a high. Like his Jokic's floor is higher than 99% of the league,
Hmm.
right? Let me phrase that again. Jokic's floor is higher than 99% of everybody else's ceiling. Like that's how good he is, in my opinion. So,
Wow.
so I agree with you, Zach. I like the Jokic thing, and another thing I'm sure we'll get into later is I actually penalize a lot for players who can't play. So Embiid is not in my top five,
Yes, I did.
just straight up right now, right?
Oh, there we
So
go. I
like
love it.
he might
I love
be
that.
super skilled, he might be unguardable, but if we can't count on you when I need to, then I'm just gonna penalize you. I'm not even gonna put you on the list. So
He,
um
I
I
think
wanted
he
to say
gets,
that
Might
because
take a lot
Jokic,
of
for
like, my
all the
man.
things he does, he carries his country, he carries his NBA team. He played like 78, 79 games last year. Like the dude
yes,
is a monster.
yes. And Embiid is so good, right? But there's no precedent for playoff success And it's never pretty.
He's not even a top 10 playoff performer.
It's
Like
never
there's
see it's never pretty with him, right? It's not that he gets to the playoffs and he puts up a hard fight and like okay, can we say we understand the season with Jimmy and Ben, and the locker room was unhappy because they all thought Jimmy should be point guard. The front office wanted Ben with the ball in his hands. Like we can say, okay, we can acknowledge that that was not a great situation there. But especially since then, like nothing, right? And he is injured by then, which is not his fault, or he's playing, but he has insane high highs and he has insanely low lows. He just hasn't put up the consistent resume and production in the postseason, which is paramount to ranking players at this echelon, at this level.
Yep.
If like the point of the game ultimately is to win. And if you win
can't
a
win.
lot of games and then you win in the playoffs and you win the entire championship, like that's not something that I can just brush away. I can't just brush that away. I can't just be like, "Oh, but at a certain point, like what's the point of counting the score if you're not going to give the head nod to the people that have won at the highest level?" So, I will say that on the Embiid note, um, he's so good. And when he's playing, he's so impactful. In his 39 games played in this past season, he easily had the best overall EPM in the entire NBA. And it was because he was better defensively than 99% of the league, and he was better offensively than 99% of the league. And, Shea, Luca, they don't have the defensive dominance that Embiid had analytically. Also, just eye test. When Embiid was playing, he was money, except then in the playoffs, you see him get fatigued and exhausted. And like I was saying, it's never pretty. His playoff crash outs are not like, you know,
All
it's
right,
it's
being
it's
being
ugly.
we're having the MVP conversation real quick. The MVP, the MVP, MVP, M Joel Embiid conversation. That one. Yeah, it was a tongue twister. Do you guys think he has any chance getting up this high if he plays 75 games? Does that
Yes.
allow him, like now
Yes.
that Paul George is there and what we think Tyrese Maxey can do, can he stay healthy enough to be great in the playoffs finally? I think it helps, but Paul George is injury prone too, so we'll see. But I'm not ruling him out for being in this conversation next year.
No, not at all.
The devil's advocate to that, yeah, the devil's advocate to that conversation is I don't think Philadelphia wants him to play 75 games. He's a high injury risk. Like I think from 60 to 70 is his sweet spot, and then hopefully he's in shape and healthy by the playoffs. I think for him to
Right.
get into this list, top five and arguably one, I mean, he won MVP 2 years ago. If he can win a Eastern Conference Finals. Like if he
Oh yeah, he's
wins
got
the East this year, then I think he can have a legitimate argument because the only way the Sixers are gonna win is if Embiid is Embiid. So yeah, that to me is the
He's
only
so
way.
good. He's so dominant. He's just
I
he's
don't
either hurt,
disagree. Yeah, I
he's
don't
either
disagree.
hurt
yeah,
or just
his
not
one
showing
game
up.
peak is insane.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like game 3, first round of the playoffs at home, he drops 50. Oh my God. Like the most he had dropped in a playoff game before that was 40, and it was against the Hawks in like the peak of lockdown quarantine. And then he comes out,
Yeah.
get round one against the Knicks, who have a strong defense, even with all their injuries, and 50 ball. Like and he's knocking in threes, like crazy player, but the consistency, not so much there. And so with that, Al, I'm turning to you. Who are you putting up for nomination? We don't have to agree
Yeah.
they're number two, but we might agree they're in the top five.
So you guys know I'm in Dallas, Texas. I'm a big fan
Mm-hmm.
of his, but it is not Luka Doncic. My number two player is Giannis, and the big difference there is gonna be he's won, right? Obviously, he's won a ring. He has a Finals MVP, but the biggest difference is the rebounding and the defense. He really anchors that part of that side of the court for the team. Whereas when you watch the Steph Currys and the Luka Doncic's and the Damian Lillards, teams are physically attacking them. They are pointing at Luka to go attack him on defense. So you can't do that if you're a top two player in the league. So for that reason, I think obviously Luka is the better passer. He's a better shooter. He's a better all around offensive player. But I think the gap with Giannis when it comes to offense and then defense is just larger when it comes to the defensive side of the ball, which includes rebounding. And he's an elite rebounder. I like Giannis here at number 2.
Now,
All
Zach
right.
had a
So
reaction to that pick. So
yeah, that was
let's
a
hear
massive reaction. So
it.
here's the thing. I agree with everything he said.
But
So Kris is going to be the deciding factor here. But like at the beginning of the show, we stated it's the 23-24 season. If this was 3 years ago, Giannis, bar none, yes, of course. That Giannis also 3 years ago was better than this Luka. I agree that season he had. So best individual season I give to Giannis yet at his peak, yes, but he wasn't healthy this year in the playoffs. Therefore, he does get demoted. And Luka, like I'm all about giving players their due. When we're talking about current top five, like overall career, sure, yes, Giannis is having the better career right now. He gets a little edge, but Luka is my clear number 2 guy right now based on the season he just had.
oh, this is tough, y'all. I mean,
So
Giannis
it's
was
down to
still
Kris.
very, very good, right? Nah, man, I'm not doing a 2-1 vote. We
No, you
gotta we
gotta.
got we gotta agree.
We got it.
We gotta agree. Giannis, like, okay, you want to run the most basic numbers. We can do that and say, all right, you look at this past season of his, he played 35 minutes a game in 73 games. He averaged 30 points per game over the course of the season, shooting 27% from downtown. This guy is a monster inside the paint. 11 and a half rebounds. And then
So you can
a career high 6.5 assists. Bro,
give him the edge in the regular season, but bring
30
in the
and a
playoffs then
half,
and have the convo.
30 and a half, 11 and a half, 6.5 for the regular season. Like,
Right. Now
that's
talk about
definitely
playoffs.
crazy. That's definitely crazy.
In
Okay.
limited minutes.
That's definitely crazy in 35 minutes. Like, ah,
But the playoffs is more important.
I mean, listen, we know what happened, right? The Indiana
We can't have
Pacers.
that Embiid conversation and then
I know.
put Giannis above Luka.
I I
I
completely
think it's a
understand.
legitimate argument, Kris. Yeah, Kris, before you make your final vote, when we're talking about Giannis, and I think the gap on defense is so large here, but when we're
Massive.
talking Giannis, you mentioned those stats, right? But this is where when we get to comparison, who had the I don't like this stat, but it is what it is. Who had the higher PER? Giannis over Luka. Who had the higher win shares? Giannis over Luka. Yes, these are regular season stats, and yes, Luka made it all the way to the NBA Finals. That probably gives him 2 or 3 extra points, and I agree with you, Zach, when it comes to that. But when it comes to Summer Olympics, Luka wasn't there. So the fact that Giannis is playing, I think that should give him a couple points there as well. I mean, it's gonna be a hard decision. I know Kris is the deciding factor, but I would say Giannis had to deal with more in terms of injuries, coaching situation, all that kind of stuff throughout the season, compared to
Middleton was
Luka
out for a lot of the year. Luca
and
also didn't
Luka
get
in
Washington
the
and Gafford until
playoffs.
the deadline, though. So I guess,
Yeah, Luka in the playoffs was great, but there were a lot of moments where it wasn't Luka that carried the team. It was Kyrie. It was
For sure. He wasn't
the role
perfect.
players that yeah. So I mean, I don't think you can get it wrong here, Kris.
Luca didn't have PJ and Gafford until the deadline. Giannis missed Chris for a lot of the year, right? Like
His record was insane when he got those guys.
there was a factor either way that was against these guys. You want to take it to the analytics, right? EPM, Luca's zero point 0.4 points higher, only zero point 0.4, and it's obviously because of defense where Luca's a plus zero point 0.4, Giannis is a 1.8. On offense, Giannis is a 5.7, Luca's a 7.6. So, offense, like, we know it's not close. The thing is, Giannis is so versatile. He can be a rim protector or a weak side rim protector. um his buckets aren't dependent on his 3-point outcome, right? Like he averaged 30 points a game, shooting 27% from downtown. To me, like then if he is hitting his three, that like Zach, you love to talk about ceiling, right? Like if Giannis is having a game where
Oh,
his three balls
yeah, I
hitting,
just said Giannis's ceiling's higher right now,
exactly. It's so hard,
but
especially
we're not
given
projecting.
I know Giannis had a lower usage rate this past season than Luca. He played two fewer minutes per game and he put up insane production. I want to know, Zach, can I get you to cross over to Giannis with him being in the
I said it was your
Olympics,
call. So, all right, Giannis is number
him
two. Here we
him
go.
being in the Olympics and Luca not making up for the playoffs that he didn't play in because he was hurt. Maybe that's the edge, the little smidgen of a factor that puts him over. For me, it comes down to a lot of it comes down to how replaceable are you. And for Giannis to be his size, bringing the defense that he brings to the table, averaging 6.5 assists per game and 30 points. Like it's just insane how versatile he is. And I think somehow it's impossible to even say this and take myself seriously, but like if you did have to replace them, I think what Luca can do talent wise is incredible, but it's more easily replaceable. Scoring, playmaking is more easily replaceable than a 7-footer who's a shot blocker, who's a rim protector, who's a distributor and playmaker, who's scoring 30 points a game.
I
It's
think
just
their supporting casts are pretty equal too, though. So that's what makes this conversation extra hard.
it's unreal.
One underperformed and one overperformed.
Yeah.
Are you talking between Luca and Giannis?
No, I'm talking the supporting cast.
Oh, okay, okay.
I mean, they had Dame and Chris. Dame, Chris, Giannis. Just putting that on paper heading into the season, I mean, that's potentially the best top three in the NBA, right? And then by the end of the season, nobody wants Chris anymore. And then Dame's, always with his foot out the door. So I mean, um, yeah, one just super underperformed.
Mhm.
People forget how amazing Dame Lillard was heading into the season.
Oh, his highs were really high, but he just was pretty inconsistent and had a bunch of lows as well. Middleton was solid in the playoffs too. He had some good moments.
It's
Yeah.
easy to have good numbers against the Pacers.
Cash
Just
money, Chris.
True,
throwing that
true.
out there.
That's a fact.
So you're going
Uh,
with Giannis, Chris?
no, we're on Giannis.
We're
Yep.
we've got to go Giannis. We've got to go
Okay.
All right.
Giannis.
So number three, we're gonna make it easier, or
I
we're gonna have a
think I
debate at number
think
three now.
I think it's easy for me. I think you
All right.
go Luca. I think number 4 is where this gets very interesting.
Well, that was my top. Never mind. My top four. We'll see. But like, I had Giannis at four. I'll tell you that.
Okay.
Since
I,
three
Okay.
yeah.
was so easy for us to name, Chris, maybe you just you stay with four. You choose your fourth best.
I'm gonna put SGA on the table.
I agree.
Mm.
I'm putting SGA on the table. This kid is ridiculous. I mean, you talk about like let's talk about him and I have my qualms when people do this for players like Kevin Durant because I think they tend to ignore his career like winning history. But that said, if you just want to talk from a pure game planning perspective, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, 6'5", 6'6", lanky, rangy, point guard, ball handler, lead ball handler. He's a lead ball handler that is a paint touch whenever he wants one. He can get into the paint at will. The 3-pointer is slowly coming along. Regardless of that, he's a mid range assassin. He makes his teammates better. He's a leader on and off the court. He tries hard on defense. He's not the reason that OKC is good on defense. They're also not actively always trying to hide him, right? Like he can guard up. His size makes him switchable. He's versatile offensively. But the fact that he's a lead guard who has the mid-range game that he does and the size that he does, okay, you're playoff built, right? And I know Shea in these past playoffs hasn't turned in like the performances that you make everyone say, "Oh my God, like this kid's so young." Whatever, like no one really talked about Shea too much during these playoffs. Um, because he didn't last in them for that long. But he went down to a team that went to the finals and had a really hot, shooting performance from the supporting cast. Also, Jalen Williams wasn't like I love Jalen Williams. I'm very high on him.
Terrible in the playoffs.
He wasn't. We've talked about this on this show. He was not that good in the playoffs, and it left Shea with literally all of the shot creation burden, and he still put up numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going with Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, and I'm going to throw this out there. I think there is a world that we are sitting here doing this pod next summer saying, we can't believe it. SGA has taken over as number one in the league. I think we might be talking about him as the legit best player in the NBA over the course of this next season. His MVP odds are like plus 600. I like that. I am all in. They took the team that they had. They removed the player that fit the weirdest and was arguably the worst at their role. And without giving up any of their 8 kajillion first round picks, they got Alex Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein, two defensive demons. Caruso, a top perimeter defender, Hartenstein, a top rim protector. They're both stars in their roles, and that's exactly perfect for a playoff supporting cast. So this pod specifically isn't about projection, but that's just a prediction I'm throwing out there that we'll be back talking about SGA as the potential best player in the world. His advantage creation is reliable, consistent, ridiculous, efficient, effective, you name it. There are so few players that really, really get that much usage and deserve it and justify it. A lot of times it's teams doing it out of desperation, right? Like LaMelo Ball had a 99th percentile usage. Optimally, he's on a team where he can share the rock a lot, and that's going to lead to, even if even though the assists count as part of this, right? Like that'll go down. Jaren Jackson Jr. had a 98th percentile usage this past season with
That's
John Morant,
crazy. I
with John Morant
wouldn't
out.
have guessed that.
So like, dude, I
Wow.
think Shea gets 99th percentile usage. He is
Oh, and he
fourth
deserves it.
in the league in usage, and he deserves to be somehow higher. He's nuts, and that's it for me. It's SGA. If we're going Jokic,
You're cooked.
Giannis, Luka, I'm going SGA.
Yeah. So a couple notes. I agree. This is the first year he'll have a legit title contending team. Caruso and Hartenstein made it over the hump for him, so he could do it this year, and that would put him as the best player if he did win it.
Whether
Uh,
it's Dub or Chet, one of those two guys has to emerge as a legit playoff
yeah, they
shot
got to
creator,
perform.
and they can win the whole. They can win the whole thing. They can win the ring. I believe it.
So NBA 2K agrees with us. They have him ranked number 4. Just kind of funny, but he finished MVP 5 last year in the rankings. Um, this past year, he finished MVP number 2. He was All NBA Team 1. He was also in the MIP. He got votes there, and then he got Defensive Player of the Year votes, which is insane. No other player has been crossed off that many boxes, and I don't know how long. But very few players actually get better in the playoffs. Shea stepped his stats up. I mean, you can argue, because the rest of the team, so maybe wasn't as valuable, but he went from 35% 3-point percentage in the regular season to 44 in the playoffs, or 43, sorry, in the playoffs. And everything else stayed about very consistent. The dude's a dog. Um, Two-way player. On like Luke is the only guy we're talking about that's not a two-way player in these conversations. So yeah, I do think this guy has the goods. I mean, all of these guys we mentioned have the goods. It's just getting it done to be the best player in the league. I truly believe that. But this
I
guy
I
for
could
sure has the team.
I could understand an argument right now for already having Shea over Luca. I would hear you out.
With
Mm,
defense,
I
I
would
but
don't
hear you.
think the impact is the same. I don't think, and
I would hear
it's going
someone
to be
out.
hard to quantify. I would say it's going to be hard to quantify the impact for Luca versus Shea, I
I
mean, I
get
get
it.
that argument
But
because when you
Luca had
look
another
at
shot
the
creator.
numbers,
Like you said earlier, he had
yeah, if you look
Kyrie.
at the numbers, Shea is right there. Shea is right there with the top of the top. So I agree with you guys that he's four, but I would say one knock, I guess two knocks. There's two knocks on him. Um, One is his free throw shooting significantly dropped in the playoffs, which was really weird because he's like a 90% career free throw
Yeah.
shooter. He was sub 80% against the
Good
Mavericks.
note.
That was interesting. Maybe fatigue was getting to him. And then he underperformed for Team Canada. Team Canada as a whole, as a country, underperformed,
Man, you
but
were
he wasn't
weighing the
great.
Olympics.
Yeah,
It's
I mean, he wasn't
basketball.
great in the Olympics. It's a big deal because this was by far their most talented roster. They thought Canada for sure was going to medal, and they just didn't play really well. But there is one thing that I've told people when I talk about Shea, because you guys know
Closing
I like Shea
games.
a lot.
Closing
Yeah,
games. Clutch
I
factor.
love Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. He's still only 25 years old, and this is not a knock against Zach's player in Anthony Edwards, but I think Edwards' star is huge and on the rise, and he's getting all this press, which is justified. But when I compare those two players, especially in the playoffs, the Dallas Mavericks played OKC and beat OKC, but you saw their defense completely try to shut down Shea, and he was still going for, and I'm looking at the stats right now in the playoffs, he was still going for 37-6. That same defense
He's
then played
insane.
Minnesota. Yeah, that same defense, right? All geared towards Shea. That same one played against the Minnesota Timberwolves, all geared against Anthony Edwards. They were able to shut Ant-Man down. So I think that's the difference right now in their games. A lot of people are not going to like Shea because of, his propensity to draw fouls, but that to me is a skill in and of itself. And I think he's justified at number 4 here. And I'm interested to see what you guys think about number 5.
So Shea was so much better versus Dallas than he was New Orleans Pelicans. That's what's crazy too. Um, Night and day stats. It's crazy.
Well said. Zach, since you're already going, give us a nomination. Give us that last and fifth guy who you think should make it. He doesn't have to be the guy who makes it. Al and I could totally disagree with you, and we could vote Jonathan Isaac or Marcus Smart or I don't know, Brunson, Mitchell. I'm naming random players in my head. We could vote anyone in, but we'll give you a chance here to say
Holy shit, you actually named one.
who you think it should be.
So this is very, very hard for me. Obviously, I'd love to be biased here, but I've like to pride myself on not being biased, and I weigh supporting cast and playoffs pretty heavily. The guy I'm choosing had a pretty hurt supporting cast and was just a dog. And I don't care about 3-point percentage in the playoffs. I really don't. I've always noted this. You just got to be great more games than you're bad. And he did that. And that's what I say every playoff performer is like, there's nothing more overrated than playoff percentages. I truly believe that. When they're great, that's good, but there's so much context that goes with this. Therefore, I'm choosing Jalen Brunson of the New York Knicks as my fifth best player in the NBA right
Wow.
now.
Wow.
Yes, Anthony Edwards would be six, but
Whoa.
yeah,
What?
Brunson, man, to do what he did without with all the guys injured, no Julius Randle, Mitch Robb, OG was hurt for a bit. I mean, yeah, the dude earned this moment. He averaged 36 in a series. Um, Ant's efficiency was better, but I loved Ant's supporting cast compared to Jalen's during the playoffs. And regular season wise, I mean, you almost can give Jalen the edge in the regular season too. It's the playoffs. I think you give the edge to Ant, if anything, but I think it's close enough where I give it to the guy with the lesser supporting cast and lost to a way better team.
I'm gonna say real
Anthony
quick.
Edwards choked in the conference finals. That was the
Yeah.
last time we saw Anthony Edwards. Okay. Jalen Brunson went out like a dog.
I'm gonna say that when you look at, the Embiid debate, not being there in the playoffs, whatever. To me, like my first thought for this spot is Steph Curry. Um, that's my first thought. His impact
Hell,
is still so ridiculous. The Olympics, he has a great boost there since we were weighing that. Um, but you know, Kawhi Leonard played 68 games last year. He's someone who I also think, like in my heart, is probably a top five player. If I have game seven tomorrow, he's probably one of the first guys I pick. Kawhi is still very elite. But my thought is Steph, man. That's just where I'm at to start. I think Brunson,
Wow.
good. This will be easy. So
I
you're
think Brunson had a
disqualified.
better
You got to
season.
make the playoffs to be in this conversation.
I understand.
I
But
agree.
And Steph's my second favorite player all time.
wow. But
Sorry,
yeah,
third. Sorry, third.
I
Third.
would say Tatum has a much better argument than Edwards. I would say Tatum definitely is in here over Edwards. I would also say that I agree to put Brunson over LeBron. Um
Yeah, get LeBron's name even out your mouth.
he's LeBron's very good. LeBron
Time
is
to
st-
bring in an adult. Help me
LeBron
what
is
we got.
LeBron is still very good. I don't think Ant has the kind of argument you think he does. I don't. I'm
Oh,
not.
so you're Brunson over Ant at least.
I think I'm
Yeah,
definitely
he's covering his mouth again, so it's not clear.
I
Oh,
think I'm definitely Brunson over Ant. If we're Brunson over Embiid, we're Brunson over Ant, we're Brunson over
are you
Kawhi.
Brunson over Tatum?
I
Mm,
I have to, if we're going off this past season,
yeah.
I think I
One,
need to be because Brunson was much better offensively. Tatum was good. Obviously, Tatum's better defensively, but he was
like
also on a
career
great
wise, Tatum still
defensive
got the edge.
team. I would say Curry is who I like for this five spot.
This we're talking about 23, 24 plus Summer Olympics. Steph Curry had amazing last 3 minutes of the gold medal game. He wasn't even that great in the Olympics. If you
Right.
want to look at those games, he didn't make the playoffs. He had a pretty good regular season, but I mean those two huge knocks. He's a great player. He's one of the best players of all time. I think the greatest point guard discussion is a little too much. I still say is Magic Johnson there.
Agreed.
So Steph Curry, I don't agree with. Jalen Brunson wasn't even part of my like
Wow.
thought
He
process, to
should have
be
been.
completely
He
honest.
should have been.
But I think we're just like speaking to the big markets right now. So we hooked up the New York fans. I'm about to hook up the Los Angeles fans. Anthony Davis.
Wow.
Oh,
Anthony Davis.
Oh
He was
my
from
second
left
Lord.
team All
field.
NBA. Second team All NBA, just like Jalen Brunson. He had a higher VORP, a higher win share. He averaged 12.6 rebounds this year, guys. He was, I think, third or fourth in Defensive Player of the Year, first team All Defense, and he was, in my opinion, the best player on Team USA. So to me, it's Anthony Davis. He ended up playing 76 games. Brunson played 77 games, so you can't knock him on being injured all the time. Brunson didn't even make the playoff team, or sorry, didn't even make the Team USA Summer Olympics team. That's not a
That
shot
was
against him because
abomination.
the people who decided who's gonna represent the country was it was like a business decision. But
Yeah.
that business decision included Anthony Edwards or Anthony Davis. And Anthony Davis played out of his mind all throughout the tune-up and all throughout the games that mattered at the Olympics. Davis ran into Jokic, who just owns him in the playoffs, and he's owned him basically for his entire career. But outside of those 4 games, Anthony Davis was a top 5 defensive player and arguably a top 10 offensive player. To me, that gap on defense is huge. We talk about Luka being a one-sided player. If we include Jalen Brunson in the top 5, he is the only player in the top 5 with a negative defensive box defensive score, a negative. That includes Luca.
I get it.
So I
I
mean,
I
like
get it.
the gap here with Anthony Davis, who is one of the best defenders, and in over the Summer Olympics, he was the best defender.
Tatum
I like Anthony Davis here at 5.
Tatum has a higher Darko DPM. Tatum has a higher EPM, much higher offensive EPM than AD. Like Tatum impacted these catch-all metrics much, more intensely than AD did. And I'm not saying that's the be all end all. I think AD's impact is undeniable. Um, but that said, I feel like I can understand it not being Brunson. The defense, the size are things that just like he can't control. He's as good as he could be. Like in you know what I mean? Like he's so good. I think he can be the best player on a contender. And I think he's shown that with his insane streak of like 40-point performances in the playoffs. He had so many. I understand him not being in the top 5. I understand not having LeBron either because the playoff success hasn't been there. But it's the same thing with AD. Like these guys, LeBron and AD impact the game to an insane extent on offense and on defense. LeBron was a bigger part of Team USA's ventures, I think, over the course of being there, but AD was incredible. AD's impact was so high. I would say if it's definitely not going to be Curry, who we agree on, that I would then switch to pushing the Tatum agenda. But I don't know that I have him in my top 5. I think I'd be compromising, but that's okay. That's allowed. I don't know who else we could all agree on as being the best because I AD doesn't have the playoff success. And I think Tatum
I love
get
that.
Tatum gets undercredited for the playoff success, but would we be overcrediting him by putting him top 5? I also think so. So I'm stumped here, fellas.
I love that it's coming down to this for number 5. This is just perfect, and we're all appealing to the masses here. But I will say this. I agreed with everything Albert said. He was excellent in the playoffs. I mean, the dude averaged 28 and 16 or something, and literally I just went over every single game. His numbers every single game were excellent. Don't get me wrong. He was the Lakers' best player, but they only won one game, and I just don't think his impact is there. I just think it's somebody needed to do something for the Lakers, and Anthony Davis did it. And yes, his defense is incredible. He was the best player on Team USA. I agree to that point as well. But he did play 76 games, so we can't use availability against him either.
I
Like,
know AD. He
if they
AD
would have
was on
won
the
the
court.
series, yes, he's Albert. You got the argument all day, every day for sure. But they only won one game. It wasn't even a competitive series. The games he put up almost empty stats because they weren't even that close. Even though, yes, from watching them, they were closer. Just the Nuggets pulled away in the fourth
It was
quarter,
a
so
short series, but the
competitive.
games were competitive.
Nuggets always pulled
Okay,
away. It was so they knew
so
Where
they
whereas like
they knew how to flip
whereas
that
the
switch,
Nuggets
man.
Minnesota series was a long series, but those games were not competitive.
yeah, and looking back on it, we all agreed that Nuggets team, like that supporting cast outside Jokic, wasn't very good. So the Lakers should have had a great chance to win a couple more games and make it competitive. They
I
just kind
agree.
of choked in the clutch. But was that Anthony Davis? I don't think so. I think it was more LeBron than anybody, and choking in the clutch during that series. So I
Okay.
can't use that argument against Anthony Davis. I will say this. I do think so. Me and Kris both agree on Jalen. I'm okay with not having him there, though. If we wanted to go somebody that none of us are nominating, we could just go with Anthony Edwards and call it good. I'm cool with that.
Hell
Um,
no.
No, no,
or
Tatum
no,
else
no,
over
no,
J-
no.
Edwards.
or
Definitely
else
not.
Jason
I think
Tatum. I like Jason Tatum.
Ant Man at number 6 is crazier
That's
to me
nuts.
than
That's
having
nuts.
Brunson at 5. Like
It
that's
is. That
Wow.
is crazier than
yeah.
that. Correct.
So one last thing, and then you guys can cook here. So when I did my annual player rankings, the cumulative voting, people went Nikola Jokic one, Anthony Edwards mainly because of my followers. I think just got
Uh-huh.
biased and had Anthony Edwards two,
I'll
but
tell
Luke
you right
was
now, he's not
three,
top
Shea,
6.
Shea was four, Giannis five, Joel Embiid six. But the guy we haven't mentioned that they had was Kevin Durant at 7. And I'm glad
I
we're all on
don't.
the same
Yeah,
page.
I don't have him up at this
But they had
echelon right now.
Brunson at 11, Anthony Davis 12. So I don't know. Maybe the
So
tiebreaker is Tatum.
I'll say this about Anthony Davis before Chris, you could close it. But Anthony Davis to me has been the best Lakers player now for a while, and I think he gets a bad rap because every time the Lakers lose or don't look great, people are not going to blame LeBron. And I'm a LeBron fan, right? You guys know I really like LeBron, but he just has a stature in the league where they're just not going to blame him, even though they might be thinking it internally. So all of that hate and all of that criticism always falls on Anthony Davis. I'm not trying to be an Anthony Davis defender by any means because he has shown a propensity of missing games throughout his career. But if we're looking at just last season, and we're including the Summer Olympics. I think that's why it gives him the push over someone who didn't even make the Olympics.
I
And if
hear
we're
you.
talking about postseason success, right? If we're talking about postseason success, I think the Knicks beat the teams that they were supposed to beat, and the Lakers beat the teams that they were supposed to beat, and that's it. I don't think anybody outplayed. Brunson did a lot. He was very clutch and his shot making was unbelievable. But I think the team themselves beat the teams that they were supposed to beat, and same with the Lakers. I don't think any like outcome was so extraordinary that that person should get an extra bump or be penalized for it.
I do agree Anthony Davis is ahead of Steph Curry currently. I do agree on that one. But it's close. It's close. All right, Albert, it sounds like Anthony Edwards is out. So I'd
Hell
say
no.
you decide. I'd say you decide. Let's put this on Albert between Jason Tatum and Jalen Brunson. And that will be, I
I
think
mean, we
that's
started this
just from this
podcast saying
conversation.
the whole yeah, we started this podcast saying the whole point of basketball is to win. The Celtics ended up winning, right? That's basically the trump card for everything right now. He ended up winning the Eastern Conference Finals, the NBA Finals, and the Summer Olympics. So that's Jason Tatum. He's probably the fifth. And I'm not a big Tatum guy, but
Love
I
it.
give him
Hey,
his props. He
I
won all
don't.
three. He got the trifecta.
He's not in
put the bias aside.
my personal top five, but exactly if that's how we're doing this list, I'm with it. Fellas, Jokic, Giannis, Luca, Shea, Tatum. We've got a lot of talent in the NBA right now. This was lots of fun. This was very hard. I Tatum. I
Last
like I said,
question.
he's not in my top five, but I'm okay doing it if he's who we can all agree on. Because I can't go AD. I
I think
can't.
it's a solid top five,
Okay,
though,
so
boys.
here's
I do,
how about
because
this hypothetical, Chris? How about
Mhm.
this hypothetical? What if the Celtics did not win the NBA Finals? Would it be Brunson then?
Brunson. I'd
Yeah.
because
Because
I
Tatum winning the gold medal, I mean, that was a non like
that puts him over
he gets
the
zero,
edge.
yeah, he gets 0 points for that.
That put him over the edge along with the fact that Brunson wasn't on the team, right? But like the thing to me with Brunson is that he's kind of like Jokic in not in play style in the sense where there's an archetype bias. The center that isn't a great defender, or the point guard that's too small. Um, but when you look at the reality with those two guys, like I think Brunson's better than Embiid right now. Let's put a bow on this with some shout outs to some names that we think might be on here next year. I've already said I think Shea could be number one next year. I've got to throw this out there. And this might be blasphemous. This might be sacrilegious. How far are we from Wemby?
I knew you were going to bring that up because you do. So I personally don't think he's a top 20 player yet. Maybe like you could
Whoa.
argue top 25, sure, but
I think he's
top
definitely top 25.
okay, but to be a top 20 player, you got to win at least 30 games. I'm sorry. You have to win. That's my bar. And I think
They weren't trying to win to his
I know,
defense. They
I
weren't
know.
trying to win.
But if he was gonna he didn't even play much minutes wise, to be honest. But this year they are gonna try to win. They brought in vets. I do think they should win way more than 30
Harry
games. I think
B.
they should be able to, yeah. I think his ceiling for this year is top 15. I really do.
Nah,
Maybe top 10 if we're
nah.
lucky. You think he's
Realistic
taking the
ceiling,
old
maybe
Luca
top
jump?
15.
Luca jump.
I think his ceiling for this year is top 10. I think ceiling,
That's not top
ceiling's
5, so
ceiling's a
that's good.
ceiling's a stretch, man. Ceiling's a like that's
Ceiling, yeah,
ceiling.
ceiling is the best of the best.
I hate evaluating things by ceiling because it's like how often do you get the best possible
Yeah,
outcome?
yeah.
Very
I mean,
rarely.
but realistically, we could be talking about a second team All NBA player, a first team All Defensive player, a Defensive Player of the Year, an All-Star player, and a potentially postseason player. I mean, that's incredible for a 21-year-old second year player at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Anyone else we
So,
think could be on here next year?
Yeah,
yeah, I just want
so
to say that
we don't have Brunson. We don't have Brunson as top five this year, but I think we talk about teams who are trying to win. The
Winning.
Knicks are
Yep.
all right now, right? So if he makes the Eastern Conference Finals and even the NBA Finals, he's probably a top five player, even though his supporting cast is going to be a lot better this year. We talk about um, the other guy. It's not Anthony Edwards. I think Anthony Edwards has the potential for top five, but I think the gap, in my opinion, the gap between the six, if we include Brunson, and Anthony Edwards is like a lot bigger than you and I agree, Zach. Like I have
really
Embiid
don't.
higher, obviously, right? If the Sixers make the conference finals, I'm
Embiid could
gonna
very
have
well.
Embiid over Ant-Man, right? If the Warriors somehow get there, I think Steph Curry is gonna have a historic year. He's gonna be higher than Ant-Man. So the only way for Ant-Man to get there, in my opinion, he definitely has the charisma, he definitely has the star power, all that already, but he himself needs to be an all first team all NBA player. And the Minnesota Timberwolves as a team has to make the NBA finals. So to me, those are his goals this year to be a top five player on this list.
So yeah, no pushback there really. I would say this to make it in simple terms. So our top four, I think, is going to be pretty interchangeable. Any of them can be in any position next year. I think they're all ceilings are all pretty equal or can get there. So that any of those guys could finish number one. I don't think Jason Tatum could be number one next year. I
I don't
think
think
it
he'll be
like
in our
three.
top 5 next year.
That's crazy. Okay. So, which no, that's fair, but like
Shea,
you just said it so
Shea,
definitively.
Shea, Embiid, Luka, Jokic, Brunson, I think is what we're looking at.
Do we all agree out
Giannis.
of the guys we mentioned,
Oh,
like Jalen
Giannis.
Brunson is the only one that can't get much higher than like three or four, correct? I
If
don't
he
think he
wins
has the
the
ceiling any
if he
higher.
wins Finals MVP,
He would have to win the
He's top
regular
five.
season MVP and finals MVP for him. Like, I just don't think he'll ever put up the numbers, especially with his team getting way
I
better
would
this
agree
year.
with Zach there. Let's say he sweeps the board and he wins Eastern Conference Finals MVP and Finals MVP.
It'd be
I
like a
think
Tatum
people
title this year, in
still
my opinion.
I get that.
I think
But he
people
would
would
win
still
Finals
grade him
MVP and not Jalen Brown.
under Jokic. Yeah.
Mikal Bridges is
Tatum
never
should
winning
have won.
Finals MVP over Brunson, man. I'll tell you that.
True. I agree. Last shout outs I will say is I think Durant, Curry, LeBron, I think they're about capped. I
Done.
don't think they're getting yeah, I don't think they're not I don't think they're getting the top five, and I don't think they
I'll
have
tell
number
you a
one
player.
ceiling.
I'll tell you a player that could get into the top five if they do that sweep. If they will win the conference finals MVP and the NBA finals MVP.
Dev
His
Book.
name is Devin Booker.
I like that one. Thank
I
you.
knew
I
it. I
agree on
knew it.
that.
I
That's
knew
good.
it. I
That's a
knew it.
good deep reach.
He won me
Um,
over, man. Watching him play
Yo,
Summer Olympics
I've
and playing
loved him for
defense,
years.
carrying the ball.
He is so good.
how far how
Yeah,
far is Paulo?
Very,
he's very far.
very
I think
far.
he's a top 20 player right now. And
Wemby's better than
Give
him
me
today.
Wemby. Give me Wemby over
Al and I are
Paolo.
on the same wavelength right now. Al and I
oh,
are on
give
this,
me Wemby going forward, but
No,
or right
next year.
now,
Give me Wemby this
or
coming year over
oof.
Paolo.
this past year. I'm, I'm right there, man.
Do you
All right.
think Donovan
Hey,
Mitchell could
Zach,
sneak into like number six or five?
Devin Booker or Anthony Edwards?
Buck.
Oh, Anthony Edwards for sure.
Sheesh,
Two
that's
way guy.
crazy. That is
Here's the
crazy.
thing. Like
Buck.
Devin Booker to me I don't think he's gonna get much better than he is, which is really good. But
But he
his
is right now is
ceiling,
better than Anthony Edwards.
well, I'm okay with you saying that, but like he's not higher on this list because he didn't have a better playoffs, and that's what it comes down to. They're that close in player where
Postseason was a
we're
big
picking at
knock. It was a
hairs.
big knock on Booker.
So Devin Booker is only going to be as good as his supporting cast. He's not necessary. So he's a ceiling raiser, in my opinion. Anthony Edwards is a way better floor raiser than Devin Booker. I think Devin Booker is a
I don't
ceiling
know,
raiser.
man.
So
Devin held it down for the Suns for a long time.
yes, I agree he's their best player, but I mean, holding it down you're talking those 25, 30 win seasons. Yeah, that was great. Holding it down,
He's
baby.
playing with Tyler Ulis, dude. He's like he's playing point guard and
There's
shooting guard.
Yeah,
context.
let's not knock Anthony Edwards supporting cast. That's a really good team that
See, that's
was
the
built
thing,
to
man.
win in the playoffs.
And
Oh,
he
I'm
got drafted to a squad that went and unloaded the picks. Like, listen, yo, I think Devin's better than Ant right now, and I don't know who's going to be better next year, but I would say Devin has a better chance. We'll keep talking about it. I think
It's a great discussion. I
it's a
think
fun
those
one.
two, in my opinion, like just looking at the league as a whole, I think if you're wanting to identify the next first team or second team guard, it's gonna be those two because Luka is already gonna get one of those spots. So it's gonna be either Booker or Ant-Man or Shea.
well, James Harden's going to be vintage this year and average 35, so we might be. I can't say that with a straight face, but
All right, that's
it
our cue
would
to
be
get out of here,
dope.
man.
It would be
That's
dope.
our cue to get out of here. Thank you everyone so much
Kid
for
can only
listening.
dream.
Current top five, maybe a little bit of talk about a potential top five next year. If you're still listening or watching on YouTube, thank you so much. Leave a thumbs up, subscribe, leave a comment. You can leave a comment on YouTube or Spotify. 5 stars if you're on Apple or Spotify. Subscribe, hit the notification bell if you're on YouTube. And with all of that, presented by Ball is Life for Albert Nguyen and Zach Noble, I'm KP saying so long. See you soon.